Hey, Will, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. I'm okay, thanks. Today I bring with me a couple of guests, as you mentioned
No,
earlier.
I'm waiting for the excitement. Where's the excitement? I'm waiting for the vibes. But
Yeah.
yes, tell me more about these guests, please.
So we've got James, we've got Danae, and we've got Yusuf. So as you mentioned, Danae's from Paystack, James is from RetroRabbit, and Yusuf is from Ioba, which is a part of MTN. So today they're basically going to share with us a couple of interview tech tips. I'm going to pose some questions to them. And then hopefully people find what they have to say insightful. I definitely think it will be insightful. So these are the people that deal with trying to get the best in technology every
And
day. So
I mean, what better space to be in than technology? Like, look at COVID.
yeah,
So
definitely.
I
Yeah.
think it's a wonderful space to be in. So I cannot
Hmm.
wait
Yeah.
to be a part of this event today.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Cool.
gonna jump off now. So have
All
fun.
right, cool. Okay, cool. No
Okay.
worries. Thanks, Ria. Okay, so first I'm just gonna add our panelists. It's Yusuf, and that's Danae, and then we have James. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Feel free to mute yourselves. We can start with Yusuf. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about yourself before we jump into the questions, and then we'll hop on to Danae, then James.
Good evening, Lucy, and evening to everybody listening on the other side. Uh, Great to be here, firstly, and just a bit of a fun fact. Um, Almost exactly 10 years ago, I joined what was then known as GTUG, Johannesburg GTUG, which was the origins of GDG. It was like the first meeting that we kind of set up, and a lot less professional and polished and organized as it is this evening. So really, really happy to see where this has become and what this has become. About myself, I'm the head of technology for Ioba. It's a company that's owned by MTN, but it pretty much runs independently as a startup. I spent 15 years at MTN before that, and about 10 of those 15 years were in a management role where I was involved with tech recruitment and looking after technical teams. So glad to be here
Okay,
and happy to chat to you about recruitment and hiring.
thanks, Yusuf. Danae.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah,
It's my
yeah,
first day in a new house, so I'm hoping the Wi-Fi is not going to give me any surprises.
cool.
I'm Danae. It's lovely to be with you. I'm an engineering manager at Paystack at the moment. I've been there since January this year. I live in London, actually. Yeah, I'm South African, but I live in London at the moment. Um, but yeah, as you can hear from my accent, I'm South African. Before this, I worked at Luno as an engineer and also as an engineering manager. That was the first time I had a kind of full-time engineering management job. And then yeah, I was an engineer for many years before that, an individual contributor. So I've had a couple of years of being very deeply involved in recruitment. We don't have any recruiters at Paystack at the moment, so it
Yeah.
is just me and my two engineering manager colleagues who do the hiring. So excited
Oh
to chat
wow.
about it tonight.
Oh wow. Yeah. I wonder what all the workload is like then. Is this still like a growing startup or?
No, we're pretty well established. But yeah, I
Okay.
think the recruitment, we definitely need to get some help because at the moment I'm messaging people on LinkedIn at like 11 at night, which is not great. So
Okay. Cool. No worries. Thank you for joining us, James.
How's it, everyone? My name is James. I'm the talent and learning manager at RetroRabbit. I've been there for about 2 years. I've been in tech recruitment for about 8. And I suffered through 2 years of finance recruiting in a previous life as well. My fun fact is my first GDG was when I actually met Vusi, who was a member of the audience in those days. And I think still working at uh, uh, Internet Solutions, if I'm not mistaken. If my memory is that long, Vusi, correct me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a long time
Was,
ago. Yeah.
it's also the first time I've had to be on this side of things. Normally, I'm the person poking other people in the back, convincing them to speak.
Hmm.
But yeah, for me, I've like I said, I've been in tech recruitment a while. I'm very passionate about giving people opportunities, and particularly grads. It's a big point for me, is giving people their first opportunity and kind of bringing them in. But obviously, that expertise extends all the way through from juniors to seniors. So keen to talk to you guys tonight.
Cool. Thanks, James. Okay, thanks, guys. So yeah, I have a couple of questions that hopefully the audience will find insightful. I'm going to ask you questions that I came up with, questions that I feel like can get us to understand exactly how the industry works as much as possible and to set us up for success. And hopefully after this talk, we're a little bit more prepared, a little bit more. We have a bit more courage in us to apply for those positions. Okay, so I'm just going to start with the first one, and just to kick us off. So the first one is, how important is the degree to apply for a position these days in tech? So for instance, I started my career doing something else. As James mentioned, now I was internet solutions. I was a network engineer back in the day. Now I want to go into tech. I'm still sort of as a first Spider-Man said, training wheels protocol. But I am sort of getting there. How important is a degree in that instance as I get more confident in my programming ability to sort of venture into something like this? Yusuf, we can start
Shall
off
I go
with
for
you.
it? Yes.
Yeah.
Brucey, I'm going to answer most of these questions from two contexts. I've had the
Okay.
fun opportunity to work in a large corporate environment for many years, and more recently in a startup. So I'll try and maybe contrast the differences between the two where I can, right?
Okay.
So for large corporates and some of the older industries like telco and banking and things like that, you still will find that degrees are, a prerequisite for certain functions, right? So when you're applying it, you'll often see, a list of things that are needed, and often in there you might see the requirement for a degree. It's becoming less of an issue these days for sure, and it's not a concern at all in the startup environment where I am at Iowa. Having said that, I mean, it is something that adds to a CV. At the end of the day, it gives the recruiter a little bit of a sense of comfort that somebody's been through some formal training process, and it counts for something. It doesn't count for everything for sure. And then so it's a factor that plays in your entry into an organization. But then your question was also about, if you want to change direction, do you need to then still formalize that? My answer is probably not. I mean, these days, with the way different roles are starting to merge and people are starting to become multifaceted and need to be multifaceted in the development space, from dev to ops, full stack, etc. There's an expectation that people have to broaden their skills. But once you're in an organization, it's more about attaining those skills and less about formal degrees. The certifications are good. I mean, those are always good to keep adding onto your CV and your profile for your next hop into another organization. It serves as a form of recognition that you've actually formally done something. But within an organization, I don't think it's that important to always formalize that. In fact, that can take up an extra amount of time that you would have rather used in just growing your skills naturally, I guess.
Okay. Cool. Anybody else wanna add to that?
I think so. From my perspective, is going to come predominantly from consulting, as you know. Unfortunately, as Yusuf said, a lot of companies still put a heavy weight on a qualification. You'll know that from your own experiences. It is a point of major frustration for me, right? Like, even when I look at the young people we bring into the business every year, like Yusuf said, it carries some weight. It shows that you can learn. It shows that you have some basic technical understanding. But what percentage of what percentage of knowledge you actually use from your degree in enterprise level engineering positions is a lot closer to 0 than 100%, unfortunately, right? Like, we spend a lot of our time with young people reteaching everything. But when you're dealing with large corporates and telcos, which for consulting companies is the bulk of our clients, to get past procurement, they need to know, okay, cool, where is this person's certifications? Where are the qualifications? What is the NQF level? So it's getting better, I guess, is the short answer. I think as some more of the, excuse me, as my washing machine sings to us, as some of the certifications are starting to carry a little bit more weight, I think it'll continue to improve. Some like the Udacity nanodegree program is a good example, I think, of something that gets a little bit closer to it. In terms of transitioning, I think the best advice for someone who isn't in tech now that wants to be is surround yourself with people that are like-minded people like you did, like go to meetups, engage with professionals, know what it's like, start doing some certifications and understand what the role actually entails. But the biggest barrier from my perspective on the recruitment side is people have quite unrealistic expectations of what that transition is going to look like, right? Like I interviewed a senior mechanical engineer some time ago who wanted to transition into software engineering. And his expectation was he's a senior now, he'll be a senior when he transfers across. And unfortunately, you've got to understand that you're effectively not quite restarting your entire career, but close to it from a technical proficiency perspective. So you're going to feel a little bit of pain as you kind of upskill from a salary perspective and from a learning perspective. And I think a lot of people get to a point where they can't make that. But if you understand that going in and you're realistic about that and you say to yourself, hey, I need to give myself 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, to get back to a similar position. And that's kind of the piece that you have to make. That's the only thing I can add from my side.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I would just add from my hiring perspective, when I'm looking for people, I've got, all these backlogs going, and I just want people who can come in and start building. So to me, what I really look at is like not so much how this person is trained and what they've studied, but like what have they built. So either if they've had, formal software engineering jobs and they've built things in their jobs, then that's what I'm interested in. If you are trying to transition, or you kind of coming in as a student, as a grad or whatever, then it's more like side projects, your own personal projects, open source. So like, is there some website, app, GitHub repo, like something that you can show me that you've built, which for me carries a lot more weight. I think you can know all the theory and all the algorithms and data structures and things, but like building production software is a different story for me.
Okay, yeah, actually that was going to lead to like a second question I had is, for example, if I say like, I've got no formal training, but I've got a GitHub repo chock full of projects. How would that maybe be not really a replacement, but more like a proof is in the pudding type of thing?
I mean, for me, absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Seconded on this, and I explicitly look for that on CVs and ask for that in interviews, so for sure.
Okay, cool. Perfect. So, okay, I'll just get into another question where I basically ask. So, when you guys put roles out, right? Maybe from a corporate perspective, Yusuf, as you mentioned earlier, it's like they do sort of like the old school way, at least in the degree conversation, that's what I insist on, but what about more the hiring, right? So from a corporate side, do they do like, okay, how much does HR, if any at all, have any input in the job spec of like, we want someone that knows how Git flow works, for example. And to James and Danae, from your sides, maybe you guys can give a bit of a different perspective. So as a tech recruiter, is it more like let's say the engineering director or the manager of the team goes, we want ABC. Do you guys provide any sort of input into maybe what they're looking for, or do you sort of dumb down the expectations of what they're looking for, or how do you sort of collaborate how you put together that sort of what you're looking for outside before you reach out to people?
Yeah, like most things within large corporates, there's usually heavy-weighted processes that kind of govern everything. And it's one of the things I don't miss about recruitment within a large corporate is that process, that specific process. So usually it starts with the hiring manager and the hiring engineers putting together some sort of brief or spec of what skills are required for the particular job function. That usually, the process somewhat follows the same path in different companies, but that usually goes to HR, and there's a grading process, and usually there's back and forth around understanding exactly what those skills are, and how to align those skills and level them out with similar skills within the company, and then also similar skills and jobs in the market, right? So it's usually quite a heavy-weighted process. Definitely includes HR, and the bulk of it is the most important thing is making sure that your HR counterparts really understand what it is you're looking for and understand the depth of skill that you're going to be needing for a particular role. It's very different in the startup space, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of sounds
Danae?
like the opposite to mine, which is I can log in right now and change the job spec to, I don't know, must make amazing coffee or something, and that would publish. Yeah, we're lucky in that we don't yet have. I mean, we probably should have a few more processes soon. But I think for us, because we're working very closely with the engineers, and we have a good sense of what the teams need, it's really just a collaboration between the engineering managers, so myself and my colleagues and the engineers. And it's quite, I'd say our job specs are fairly I don't know, fairly general. They're not very, very specific. So yeah, that's from my side.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of popular opinions on this one, but I think job specs are largely a waste of time. I was joking with Lucy about it the other day that I've been in consulting for 5 years. I haven't actually seen a job spec really in that time. Usually my brief from anybody is, I need X skill, please go find me people. Off you go. Obviously from a process perspective, there's a job spec that gets attached, but it's so general, usually it's meaningless. So I don't put a lot of weight in job specs. I'd encourage most engineers to put very little weight in job specs. And corporates go through a lot of effort and energy to put good ones together, and I put even less weight into theirs because most of the time they're way off base. Like one of my favorite games is to go on LinkedIn and look at some of the big corporates, and you look at spec requirements, and they want 15 years in this technology that came out 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I know we joke about it, but it's literally every other job spec where it happens. So I hate job specs. I think they're a waste of time.
Yeah, so because I was actually gonna make a bit of a comment on that one. It's like, for example, they'll say they want a Kotlin developer, let's in the context of Android, and they want someone with 15 years experience, and you guys go, it's been out for less than like 12, 13 years. So it's like who we always want to who's putting together these sort of requirements, because we're trying to figure out, okay, is it the engineering director or the HR person? Because when you get into interview with them, you wonder what their expectations are as well. You kind of I don't know.
Lucy, just, if you look at this from an applicant's point of view, what that means though then is, don't get caught up too much in the details that you see on a job spec. Often get put off by a line that says 15 years of Kotlin experience. Rather try and get what the essence of the job is about and whether that interests you or not, and then make a call on whether you want to apply or not. But don't read too much in specific details that might throw you off. And if you do have concerns, make a note of those, and during your interview, ask about that, and maybe they'll be able to explain why they have a particular requirement. But for sure, don't get put off by those.
Yeah, I'd say that's really good advice.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure everyone would probably be saying, yep, that's our experience as well. It's definitely my experience, so I can tell you. Okay, so now I'm going to hop into the mind of an applicant. So I want to apply, and I put together this what I think is a great CV. When it comes to, so let's say the CV passes vetting, and you guys are interviewing me, right? So when it comes to the actual interview process, what do you guys look out for? What is it about the person that convinces you to put them through maybe to the engineers themselves that are going to interview this person. 'Cause, maybe it's something whereby, like, example, it's like I can present myself poorly, but I'm a great developer, or maybe I sell myself short in certain things, but I don't know exactly what it is I'm selling myself short on. So can you give us any sort of tips and hints around that?
I'd be curious to know from you, Danae, as well, like what percentage of LinkedIn profiles they look at versus CVs these days, because from my perspective, I don't see a lot of CVs on applications anymore, right? And a lot of the hiring we do is proactive rather than people responding to ads. But I don't think there's any like one particular thing that stands out. I think it's sort of a whole collection of things and how you put it all together. I think in terms of, I don't even know what to do in terms of general tips here, because some of the best devs I know have the worst CVs I've ever seen. Like, you can't make heads or tails of them. So generally, if I see a CV and it's really, really good, it means the person spent a lot of time working on it and has obviously been looking for a job for a while. So it's usually not a good sign. If it's slapped together in 5 seconds, it means the person's busy writing code, and I probably should interview that person. So I have a bit of a reverse mindset on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So don't have a bad CV. Is that right? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we use LinkedIn Recruiter, and yeah, it is almost quite strange for me to see someone sending an actual CV, because I think most people would just reference kind of their GitHub or their LinkedIn, which for me is totally fine. So when I look at LinkedIn, I kind of look at, obviously, job history. Like, if you spent 3 months, 6 months in your at your past 3 or 4 jobs, then obviously that raises a flag. But if it's been like if it's been like a year or 2, then at a couple of companies, then that's great. I definitely, as I said earlier, look for GitHub, look for any kind of like side projects, websites, anything like that. And then look at my notes. What else do I look at? Yeah, things you've worked on, things you've built, kind of flags about what you're passionate about. Like, are you passionate about technology? Are you passionate about what you do? And then I think in the screening interview, the big thing to me that's important is trying to get a sense of whether the person is someone who takes ownership. So whether I can give them something, give them here's a project, here's a problem, and like whether they'll do what it takes to make that happen, versus someone who kind of needs to be like spoon-fed or isn't quite used to operating independently. So yeah, and then we do, if we can't get a clear sense of someone's technical experience from their CV and from the phone screen, then we might also ask them to do everyone's favorite thing, a take-home coding challenge, because obviously that's if you're not sure, then looking at someone's code is great. Yeah, and then I guess you also look for the I don't know what words I'm allowed to say on this broadcast, but like, you don't want any arseholes, so you look for that.
Cool. Yeah. No worries. Yusuf?
I'm glad you used the word, because I was looking for alternatives in preparation for this. I was going to say we have a no jerk policy instead of a no asshole policy, but yeah, pretty much the same. I mean, the first interview is usually just to kind of get a feel for culture fit and attitude. Those are the main things that we look in the first interview. We look for hints or red flags that might indicate that the person might not be suitable technically also. But yeah, that usually during the first interview is more about just gauging the kind of mindset and looking for signs like ownership, which are usually good pointers that it's somebody worth having a follow-up technical round with. On the CV side, I still get CVs. I get lots of them, so I really do appreciate brevity and concise CVs with the main information right up front. It saves me a lot of time and effort. What I look for, like Danae, I also look for examples of passion, right? So if you've put your GitHub link on your CV right up front, for me, that's the first thing I'll click on and have a look at, what it is that you get up to. And, it shows for me self-interest and self-drive. So it's something I look for. We also used LinkedIn recently, and also OfferZen. One of the things that I like about the OfferZen environment is it has a little section on the top that allows the applicant to just explain what it is that they want to do next. I find that quite useful because it helps me gauge also whether there's a good fit for the position that we have versus what this person wants next in their career. So it's something that I've started looking at more frequently these days.
Okay, cool. And just to add to to this, you know, like with the age of tech, I've been seeing. I think LinkedIn also added recently the fact that you can now actually sort of like sending a CV through, where you can if you still really want to, but you can actually record like a 30-second to a minute video of yourself and just sort of sell yourself that way. Do you think that adds any more to the application, or do you think it's better, or like do you find it in any way more informative than just reading through like a bunch of CVs if you have to, or going through someone's LinkedIn profile if you're being proactive like that?
I actually haven't seen that. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's quite interesting. But I'd imagine it might be to do with the fact that with COVID, you kind of wanted, and with remote work, you probably
Mm,
want to sort of see the person's communication skills, maybe see how they communicate. So for me, that would be the only kind of thing that the only kind of benefit that would give. Yeah.
So I've
okay.
actually been having people approach me with videos, like literally in direct messages on LinkedIn where people record themselves. It's like, "Hi, hiring manager, my name
Wow.
is," and I'm like, I think it's kind of cool. I think in terms of the interview process, I have doubts. So I think that there is potential for it to be used well. I know your next question is leading into what are the biases that are going to come up from this, and there are lots,
Basically.
right? And it's
Uh,
a really hard thing, and I think people that are naturally introverted, and I don't want to out too many devs here, but I think there is a slight majority of introverts versus extroverts when it comes to software engineers.
mhm.
I think they're going to be sort of unfairly penalized in an environment where you have to put yourself on camera and record yourself, because a lot of people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So if it's an option, even if you make it available to some people, then those kind of applications are going to stand out a little bit more. I think there's some really cool utility for it, but I don't think that that's necessarily it. I think there's an application and a space for it, but I think it's going to cause more problems, and it's not going to add enough value for the issues that it's going to cause. That's my take on it.
Okay, cool. No worries. Yusuf, you wanna say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I also haven't seen them recently. At the start of
Mhm.
the lockdown, I remember this the first kind of interviews that were set up after lockdown on the MTN side. They did try this video submission format, and to be
Mhm.
honest, I didn't quite enjoy it. I still opted to try and get an online interview with the candidates instead. I don't know. There was just something I didn't feel right about it, unfortunately. So, not a fan.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. So just another question here is that in terms of the hiring practices that we have locally versus our international counterparts, maybe Danae, you probably have a bit more insight on this since you're living in London. Just are there any major differences between here and abroad, maybe that you've learned from in the past or looking to adopt in future, or any sort of commentary on that?
To be honest, no. I think South African companies, yeah, I haven't lived here for very long, disclaimer, but my experience hiring here, and also with Paystack, we hire in a couple of different countries. I think, yeah, I mean, there's such a range of within South Africa and within any country, there's such a range of kind of different practices. But I wouldn't say there's anything. I mean, obviously, if you're going to apply to Google or Facebook, then
Hmm.
then you kind of need to follow maybe a more rigorous, specific preparation process. But no, I'd say there's nothing. There's no like magical special things they do over here that I'm aware of.
Hmm. Okay.
I think the only comments from my side there is obviously I've known a couple of friends who've immigrated, so the Netherlands and Germany in particular. And I will say that there seems to be a much greater weighting, at least from their subjective experience, in terms of qualification and like not just degree, but postgraduate qualifications. So one of my good friends who moved across, like she gets asked in almost every interview, you got your honors when you're doing a master's, or you're busy with your master's.
Wow.
So I was like, that's
So
a
great
bit
emphasis.
subjective.
Mm.
But again, that's one or two people's subjective experience. But you know, nothing other than that I've seen personally.
Okay. Okay. Yusuf, you have anything or
No, I haven't had any
okay.
complex experience with comparing how it's done internationally, unfortunately. But I would imagine
Okay.
it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, I think well I can speak more as a candidate is that what I noticed is they place a greater emphasis on first of all the take-home projects and the nitty-gritty of what you've done. Like they really want to understand your thinking and they really want to like they'll sit with you for an hour and a half just to figure out what it is you're trying to do. But that's sort of been my experience, and I found it a bit different to here, where the was here, yes, there's still a lot of emphasis on you knowing your stuff, but and you doing side projects, but I feel like once you've demonstrated the level of knowledge that maybe they're looking for, then it's okay. Whereas with them, it's like, no, they will actually want to understand your thinking. Yes, maybe you've met their criteria, but I feel like it's like an extra bar or a test that you have to pass or something. So yeah, that's sort of my experience with them. So okay, cool. And then when it comes to, so this is one thing that I'm really, really passionate about. I'm hoping a lot of people in the audience are as well, with regards to feedback after a particular interview process. Um, how does that filter through, or how does that get composed? Is it just from, does it combine maybe the hurdle of maybe HR in your case, Yusuf, or the TRs more like what you saw about the candidate? Or is it just straight from the engineering people that interview the candidate and then they give you their feedback, which you then pass on? And then a second question to that, sorry if it's been loaded, is how do you sort of handle that feedback process? Is it via email? Is it like, like what happens there?
Yeah, so for the most part, it's usually managed by HR. So typically, after interviews and after the process, we will sit down with HR, discuss the entire process and what the positives and negatives were, and that feedback is usually handled by HR. However, our recruitment process is quite open. So usually when the invite goes out to the candidate, they have our email addresses on the invite, and they're welcome to contact us. So often we will get an email either during the process or after the process, either directed to the technical people or the hiring manager, depending on what type of questions they have or what sort of feedback they want. And so while most of them are handled by HR, there's a certain percentage that the feedback will go back in the form of an email, and then very rarely I'll have a request to have a follow-up discussion with an individual, and that has happened, but it's really, really rare.
Okay.
I'm going to be mean to corporates here, and I will just disclaimer, I've worked at companies that are not like an ABSA or an MTN where there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So it's easy for me to say these things, but you typically get a very beautifully crafted automated email when someone's clicked a button to say that unfortunately you were unsuccessful for this position, right? Which is still feedback and it's still valuable and it's important for people to know, because I think so many people apply for roles and it feels like you're throwing your CV out a window and hoping someone finds it. I think our approach, and it's not something that's perfect because sometimes you get like literally thousands of applications for stuff and you physically can't give individual feedback to people. But as much as possible, I think that from a recruiter side, and it's easier again in junior and intermediate positions because like for a technical recruiter, they can handle those types of conversations a lot of the time. For the seniors, it's going to be the engineering leads that are going to handle it. And a lot of the time, they don't have the luxury of time to have those conversations. But if you actually want people to get better and get meaningful feedback from the interview so they can be successful and they can improve, you have to tell them what they've done wrong.
Yeah.
And I've declined people in an interview before, and it hasn't won me many points.
Wow.
But I've been like,
Okay.
you weren't successful today, and here's why. And I'm like, these are the things that you can do. These are the things that you can improve upon. Come back to me in 6 months, and we'll chat again. So I don't get many thank yous to those types of conversations right away, but I do see them get other jobs in the future. So I think that it's not comfortable being honest with candidates on that level, and certainly no one wants to like open themselves up to that level of hate mail, because I have received a few. But again, if you're honest, and I think if you do it in a way that's I guess fair and not too critical, then you're giving the person the best chance to improve, and depending on how they receive that criticism and feedback will kind of dictate their success thereafter. But sometimes you can't get back to everyone, but as much as possible you should give people like personalized and meaningful feedback, because saying that we found other candidates we prefer doesn't really help anybody.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I think it's definitely my least favorite part of the process, right? Like no one likes giving negative feedback. And it is also tempting, just because of the time constraint, it's tempting to send a generic thing, which I do sometimes. But as James says, it's it's I guess something we can do for a good deed we can do for the world is to actually give people feedback that will help them do better in future. And I would actually love to hear from people in the comments how people prefer to get feedback, because I used to call people because I thought, oh, it's kind of like the good open thing to do. But I realized it's just not a nice phone call to get. Like the person they don't know what to expect. They feel caught off guard. Now they can't really process the feedback sometimes. So actually what I've started doing is just trying to write a bit of detail in email based on comments. And I guess you also have to be careful, because people can, hold things against you or screen grab it and post it on Twitter. But
Or get hate mail like James.
yeah, exactly. But I try to really give constructive things of like, this is what you've done well, and this is what you should think about working on. But yeah, it's definitely not the one of the least nice parts of the job.
Okay. Okay. Here's one. This is mostly about like mostly your day to day is something to do with getting people's CVs across. Is how transferable are your skills? Probably this is more to James and Danae. Yusuf, hopefully you can provide some input here as well when you're hiring. Is like when you're a TR for like maybe one position, like let's say mobile, and then they say, hey, there's a TR position in machine learning or something like that. Are your skills easy transferable? Like, does your screening follow more or less a guideline almost, or oh.
Bam to the rescue.
Welcome back, Lizzie.
Oh wow, what happened? I got
You
this.
froze on us for a bit.
Oh, sorry. Oh man, did you hear any of the entire question I asked?
It was basically, how transferable are your skills as a tech recruiter?
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
so let's say from mobile to machine learning to robotics to, I don't know, like whatever else.
I'll start since I'm already talking. I don't think if you want to be good at what you do is my answer here, right? So, and again, I don't want to offend anyone, but like for me, I did mobile web and UX for a long time, and I feel really comfortable doing those three in particular. If you put me with an intermediate backend dev or a senior backend dev, most seniors, I'm not terribly useful. Like I can understand when a person's competent or not, but making the tough decisions, I'm not comfortable doing those. But from backend perspective, I'm not comfortable enough to know what I'm talking about with the person. So again, I suppose it depends on how deep you want to go. But I would say that rather as a technical recruiter, which is weird advice to be giving today, focus on a couple of things and feel comfortable and confident with those. Pick up a few Udemy courses and get good at those and call that your niche. But you can't be everything all the time. Like you're not going to be good enough at it, in my opinion.
Okay. Anybody else want to take this one?
I don't have much to say. I'm like a engineering manager, makeshift tech recruiter. So, and I probably don't do the best job. So, don't do what I do.
Do as I say, not what I do. Okay, cool. And then if there was something about the industry that you would change, what would it be?
I can answer that very easily and quickly. Is make it 50% female.
Okay, definitely.
So, I mean, I know it was one of the other questions that I was hoping we were going to get to, but on the topic of sort of gender representation in tech, I think we do need to do something better there, right? We talked about how we get more females in the industry, but it's not starting at a young enough age. And like I've personally tried to get into schools to talk to young women about software engineering, user experience design, etc. But like female retention, even once they start their degree, once they get into industry, is awful. Like I've literally just finished my graduate process at the moment, and for every 17 CVs I receive one female. So
wow.
like it's rough. But yeah, that would be a big change for me, more representation across the board. I'd like to see slight improvements from our tertiary institutions as well to get a little bit more relevant. Like I don't want to name and shame people, but I have only a couple of tertiary institutions that I feel really comfortable hiring from at this point, which is making my job even harder. But yeah, I think just the pipeline of talent in general, more representation, and the quality of training we're providing young people would be my big ones.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if I can add one more thing to that, I mean, I agree with both of those. James earlier just hinted or mentioned, graduates as well. Another thing that unfortunately doesn't happen as often as it should is, good graduate programs at organizations that encourage, people straight out of varsity or people straight out of school with good skills to get into the workplace and to give them a good shot. We had some good programs back in the day at MTN and really got some good skills and talent out of those processes. But there's definitely not enough, particularly in South Africa, I feel. So that's another area I think we can definitely improve on.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, with regards to the gender thing, I think Yusuf, you and I had a conversation about this. I still remember, probably like 2017. Where we spoke about the fact that like a lot of the CVs you were getting at that time didn't have a lot of female candidates coming in. And James, you and I have spoken about this as well at previous GDGs. You actually recommended a book to me for anybody that's never read Brotopia. Great read. But I mean, besides a lot of the stuff that happens in Brotopia, that probably is a stumbling block for a lot of women getting involved in the industry. Like, how can we sort of tackle this? Because, I mean, even when I watch a lot of tech talks, like online from maybe international GDGs or doesn't even have to be within the coding industry. Like if I'm watching different industries, it's mostly just males. And how do we sort of engage more women to get in that? To kind of get in that, because yeah, I mean, training is one aspect. I'm more about the social aspect of it as well. I mean, if you go on Twitter, there's a lot of chatter about women and their sort of experience. But like, how do you sort of inspire other women to get involved?
Yeah, I think James was talking earlier about universities, but I think even before universities, there's intervention required already at school level to start, getting more females interested in the tech space. Something has to be done. It's just people. I remember when I was an undergrad at university, in our class of 400, there was one female. And I don't think it's improved much since then. And we've tried certain programs at MTN. I think we had some programs with Girl Code at one stage and Coding Mamas, and those are all great and will have some impact. But something has to be done at the school level, I think, to encourage more females to be interested in technology.
I think if anyone has a good answer to this question, I'm all ears, because I mean, we were talking about Brotopia earlier. Like, if you had a daughter, Vusi, would you want to send her out into work in a world like that? Because I wouldn't. Right? Like, I think representation starts to fix a lot of the problems, but we can't get better representation if people aren't studying and wanting to put themselves in those positions. Like I said, if someone has a good solution to this problem, I'm all ears. But it breaks my heart every year that I hire grads and I get 4 females out of like literally 600 applications. It's actually, it is improving. I will say that. So next year will actually be the biggest female dev intake that I've ever managed in 5 years of grad programs. So that gives me some joy, but it's nowhere near close to equal yet.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, and I think there is something. The pipeline problem is real. I think the only thing I would add is, if you do, like, for me, I don't know how to fix the big systemic societal issue, but I think the one piece of advice that someone gave me is to just to give the women that are working in tech and the women that we do work with, to give them as much of a platform to kind of, I don't know what the word is, to like celebrate and highlight them as much as possible, so that other women can see that. Younger girls can see that. So I don't know what that looks like getting them, for me, it's like getting them to speak on panels, getting them, putting them on the stage, putting them on the social media, whatever they're comfortable with, but just so that younger women or women who are not working in tech can see, oh, there are women doing this and there is a space for them, but yeah, it's a tough problem.
Shameless plug for women tech makers here for all the hard work you guys do and giving women a platform. So thank you to everybody who organizes that, Pam and everybody else.
Oh yeah. So for those who don't know, so every second month we do like a women tech makers, where literally the whole event is just run by women, and we just have female speakers just to sort of promote that. It's absolutely great so far. We've had some amazing talks. We've also had a panel similar to this one in the past as well, just featuring women and their perspectives. And yeah, it's been absolutely great, and we've been trying to sort of make that a priority. Shout out to Pam, definitely someone who's been a big promoter of that as well. So I think we have sort of reached the end of the questions. Is there anything else you guys would like to share before I open it up to questions online? Nope.
Well, good. I saw quite a few questions coming through, so interested to just take some of those on.
Okay, cool. So let's have a look through some of the questions here. Okay, this is from Fortune. He says, not sure if this is being shown, but what are some of the things that can be added to a portfolio to have an edge? So maybe anything we probably haven't mentioned before, or something that maybe you think we've skipped over.
GitHub repos, passion projects, that kind of stuff. I think both Yusuf and Danae mentioned that those are the things that are going to stand out the most.
Okay, cool. There's another question here from Domingos Manuel, who says, what's the average number of CVs you normally receive for one vacancy?
A lot.
What's the average number of good CVs you receive for a vacancy, or just CVs you receive for a vacancy? So it depends, I think, a little bit on seniority. It typically tends to thin out as you get a little bit higher up. For our grad program, anywhere from 800 to 2,500 for our grad program every year we get. And then for intermediates and above, usually, I would say we get about one hire per every 100 CVs. So we're 180 people at the moment. I don't do the math. It's not pretty. You receive a lot of applications.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to James?
Yeah, that ratio sounds about the same, but it obviously also depends on the type of skill. It's particularly difficult with with certain job functions, but 1 in 100 sounds about right, yeah.
Okay. And here's an interesting one. So, Rinesh asks, as a tech recruiter, how aware of you and your process for catering for blind disabled professionals?
Not very is the bad answer here. I have interviewed and made offers to a couple of blind candidates in the past, but even with the new POPI laws, I haven't even figured out if we're allowed to ask people anymore if they're blind. So if someone can tell me about that, because even my HR consultant couldn't help me there. But unfortunately not. We do, like I said, a lot of the recruitment that we do is active recruitment rather than passive recruitment these days. So you're basically searching for skills, and if they happen to have a disability, then it's obviously not held against them in any way, but it's not part of the selection process.
Okay. Cool. Anybody else has feedback to James?
No, I think same. We also look for skills, and we don't obviously have any idea what sort of special circumstances the person has. But I would love to hear if there's, I would love to learn about how we can make our roles and our companies more attractive and more accessible to people with who are blind or other needs.
Okay. Cool. I don't know if you guys know the answer to this one, but I think it's our last one as well. It says here, what's the best way to get hired in the early days of new SA startups like Frank or Luna? Maybe I can add a bit of context to, at least from what I've seen. There is a website called f6s.com, and what happens on that site is that there are a bunch of startups that can list what their company does, and they're complete tech startup, and they're looking for they can advertise like their need for developers. To see if they can help them out. Sometimes they don't even offer you pay, they offer you equity. So if you want to work for a future valuation, good luck. Yeah, so maybe apart from that, is there anything that you guys can maybe have shared in your previous experience? I don't know what Paystack was like in its early days before, or
I also don't know. I wasn't there, but I mean, I would say if there's a startup you really want to work for, the chances are they don't have a recruiter. They don't have time to think about recruiting. They're just desperate for people who can help them build. So if there's someone you want to work for, just cold call them, like send them an email, rock up at their offices, build something that, based on the APIs, just let them know that you're keen. I think if you can make an impression, chances are they'll they need people, they might hire you. So that would be my advice.
Okay, cool.
I'm not sure how early you mean by early days also, but if we're talking really, really early, then what I would suggest is, start getting involved in the whole startup ecosystem. There's a whole world out there with regards to how startups operate and the circles that they're in and the gatherings and formalities that happen in the startup world. We work very closely with startups at IOBA. We have something, we have this setup called the Solution Space together with UCT, and we engage a lot with startup companies through that mechanism. And there's a lot that goes on in that space, and startups are usually 2-3 people in the beginning, and it's quite easy to have a conversation with those folks. And they're often looking for either technical skills or commercial skills or whatever it is that you might have to offer. And it's a good opportunity to get involved and grow, become part of the business from the beginning.
Cool. Thanks, Yusuf. Yeah, thank you, everyone. This was a really, really great session. I definitely learned a lot. I'm hoping our audience did as well. Hopefully we can do this again. And maybe some people will probably write down questions maybe after the event, maybe send them through to us via Twitter or any of our social channels, and we'll see if we can do this again if people are keen. So thank you once again, James, Danae, Yusuf, for your time and for your amazing insight. And yeah, you guys must hopefully see you guys soon.
Cool. Thanks, Vusi. If people do have questions, Vusi, welcome to share my details, and I'm happy to respond either on my LinkedIn or through my email address. I know people have a lot of questions, but it's something I'm passionate about helping people figure out. So happy to give my time.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you so much, James.